What's up everybody, it's Erik from MatterX, and today we're going to be installing a DM-2 shifter into our 2022 WRX. But before we get started, I just wanted to take this opportunity to tell you about this custom DM-2 or DM-1 version 2 shifter we're giving away right now on the website. They're only 99-cent entries, and that ends midnight on May 20th. You could win one of these crazy machined shifters for literally as little as 99 cents. It has this custom red anodized shaft on it and some other coloring options that we don't normally offer on a shifter on our website. So go check that out, and it's May 20th at midnight. Now let's go over what's gonna come in the DM-2 package and the tools that you're gonna need to complete this install. When you get your DM-2, this is everything that you're gonna find inside of the package. We have the shifter right here. We've got a piece of linkage, a driver side mounting bracket, a cable hanger bracket, and we've got a little bag of hardware here. So let's go over the tools that we're going to need. These are all the tools that I'm going to be using to do the install today. From left to right, we have a 3/8 driver, a 10, a 12, and a 13mm socket for that. We've got a couple different extensions. We've got a 12 and a 13mm wrench. We've got a couple pairs of pliers, a Phillips, a flathead screwdriver, and we've also got a 4mm and a 6mm Allen wrench. So let's go get under the car and start with taking off the heat shield. Alright, so in order to get this heat shield off, we have a total of 6 bolts. We have 2 bolts in the back, one right here and one right here. And then we have 2 more in the center of the heat shield, here and here. And then we have 2 more bolts at the front of the heat shield. These 2 bolts here and here. These are all 13mm bolts, so just grab your wrench and pull that heat shield out. So now we can actually just slide the heat shield out of the way. It doesn't even need to come out from underneath the car. We really just need to be able to expose the bottom of the shifter. You can see this is the factory shift box right up in there, and now we have full access to it. And the next thing we're going to do is pull out the 4 10mm bolts. We've got one right there, we've got one right there, and 2 on the other side in the same exact spot. Alright, the next step's pretty simple. We're just going to pull out these 2 metal clips there on each one of the cables on the inside of this plastic cover, and then we're going to disconnect each end of the cable, this white end here and this cable here, from the factory shifter. So to get this cable here where I got my hand, all you got to do is get your fingers on the back side and just pull it towards you, and it pops right off. And to get this yellow piece off of the shifter, there's a little clip, a little metal clip on the back side of the shifter, and you're just gonna reach your hand back there and just basically expand that clip so that way we can get it off of the shifter. You can see I got one edge here with my hand, and I'm gonna do the same thing on the back side and just pop it right off. Now I'm gonna grab a set of pliers and pull these 2 clips off here. Now those clips are out, we can just push each one of the cables out through the box. Push that one out, and then gonna get this one out, and what that'll let us do is we'll just kind of free the box up from the cables, and now we can disconnect the box from the shifter. So again, there's 4 bolts, there's one there, and 2 in the same spot on the other side, and those are again 10mm bolts that we can just easily access from the bottom here. Okay, now that those 4 bolts are out from this box here, here, and then the 2 on the other side, the box is pretty much free to come out, but it's actually going to get in the way of the shifter right now. So before we go up and start pulling the shifter out, we're actually going to remove this factory cable right here out of the car completely. This is the one that we're deleting that used to connect to the shifter right here, and we're going to be replacing with a piece of linkage. So in order to pull this cable out of the car, we have a little retainer about midway through the transmission, right above one of the subframes. You can see it right there where I have the light. It is holding both of the cables together right in here, and there's a 12mm bolt right where I've got my finger. So I'm just going to grab an open-ended wrench and unscrew this so that I can pull the factory cable through this loop. Okay, I've got it unbolted off of the transmission, that little loop with the 12mm bolt, and I've pulled this factory cable out of the loop, and I'm going to reattach this bracket just to retain the one cable that we are keeping back into that position there. Okay, now that we've got the cable free from the loop, we're just going to want to push this out of the box, and we can go over to the other end of the cable on the shift plate and disconnect it, and then we'll be able to pull the cable completely out of the car. Pretty tight fit, so you might have to wiggle it around a little bit, and then you can kind of slide it through. But now we can go over to the shift plate and disconnect the other end of this cable, and then we'll be able to completely remove it out of the car. On the passenger side of your transmission, this is where that cable connects to the shift plate if you're not already familiar with it. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect this little hitch pin right here holding the cable onto the shift plate, and then we're going to go ahead and pull that clip out that you see holding it up to the transmission right over there, and then the cable is going to be free to come out. And once you have all that disconnected, you can just get up in there and pull it off with your hand, and you'll basically just want to push the cable towards the front of the car, wiggle it a little bit here. There we go, and it just drops out like that, and now we can go up into the engine bay and actually completely pull this cable out. In the engine bay, we have this nice side right here we can access. You can actually see the cable right there, so I'm just going to reach down there with my hands and just pull it out. It's completely free, so I'm just going to pull the one end out that was connected to the shift plate first, and then I can just get in there and pull the rest of it out. Before I go back underneath the car, since I'm up here, I'm just going to go ahead and disconnect the shifter and do everything from up here. So we're just going to pull the shift knob off, and then once that's done, just set it over to the side, and then we're going to pull the interior trim up. It's super easy, guys. Some of the interior trim is different on the different models, but all of them pretty much just snap in and out of the car. So you can just pull up on the sides of it, and there's some clips. You can just kind of work your way around the trim, and then you can just pull it up and out of the car. You're going to see two wires clipped into each side of the shifter. We have a little wire right there, and then we have one on that side of the shifter also. We're just going to use the needle nose to crimp the inside of the barb shut on the little plastic fittings and push them out of the shifter. And then the last thing we got to do is get these 4 12mm bolts out. We have 2 up here, and then we have 2 in the back of the shifter. They're basically just in each corner, bolting the shifter down to the chassis. And then we have these 2 little Phillips holding the shifter to the interior trim. You can see there's a little Phillips under there, and there's one right inside of that little spot right there. And we can just use a Phillips and just basically put the Phillips through this slot right here, and you can get it right into that screw, and you can unscrew those out. Now we've got the shifter completely disconnected, and you can just say goodbye to this thing because it's the last time it's ever going to be in your car. So just go ahead and pull it out. We're going to have to work it over this little fabric right here. And then we can pull it forward, and there's a little spot on the back of the shifter where those Phillips were screwed into that we'll have to kind of bring over the factory trim. Once you get that free, check it out. shifter is officially uninstalled. The time has come to stick the DM-2 into the car. This is the moment everyone's been waiting for. If you've got one of these, and there's really one good way to do this. So we're going to stick the shifter all the way forward, and we're going to kind of hold it perpendicular to us. So we're going to drop the shifter in like this, and then we're actually going to rotate it 90 degrees. I found that's the best way to do it. And as we rotate it 90 degrees, we're going to slide the frame of the car in between this lever here and the body of the shifter. So the frame of the car is going to slide in right there as we twist it. So, you know, you don't need to muscle this thing in there. Just be gentle with it and watch the video. Try and see how I do it. And basically you just want to get it in there, drop it down like this first. That's kind of the first position. Kind of see how it is. And then now we're going to start to rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm going to get it a little bit. Get this little piece of fabric on the interior over my bracket. Otherwise that's going to get in the way. And then just going to gently turn it. Keep kind of rocking it a little bit. And look at that. Goes right in. So now we got that bracket on top, and that whole side of the shifter is underneath of the car. So now what we're going to do is we're going to grab 2 of our bolts out of our hardware bag. These are 12 millimeters long, and they have 13 millimeter hex heads. There's a total of 4 of them. So go back into the factory mounting locations, just like the old shifter. But we're just going to start with these 2 and get them in on this side of the shifter. We've got a threaded hole right up there. And then we've got another threaded hole right back here. So let's just install those hand tight. We don't want to tighten them down all the way just yet. The next thing we're going to do is grab the other mounting bracket right here, the left side mounting bracket, and we are going to stick that down with the shifter. Now those 2 tabs are going to go down towards the bottom of the car. They're going to sit into the other side of the shifter. So we're just going to kind of position that with our hands. And the best thing to do now is to grab your remaining 2 mounting bolts, and same thing. We're just going to hand tighten them into that top hole and that bottom threaded hole right back there. Now we're going to grab this mounting tab right here for the OEM cable that we are keeping, and we're going to orient it just like this. So forward is the front of the car, so we're going to have it oriented forward just like that. And we're going to use that other bolt and nut in your hardware bag to mount that right up here into this little hole going through the chassis where the old shifter used to have a bolt going through. And try and get you a little better angle for it. There we go. So yeah, we're just going to drop the bolt right into there. And then we're going to take that tab and we're going to hold it underneath of the car with one hand, and then we're going to screw in that nut on this back side on the bottom of the car, and make sure the tab is facing forward and is also parallel with the shifter. So don't screw it in like this, don't screw it in like that. Make sure it's facing forward as good as you can get it. So that bracket is in there now. You can see it's facing the front of the car, and I've just kind of got it hand tight in there. It's still loose. We need to tighten the bracket onto the shifter before we tighten any of these bolts down. So let's go ahead and go get the 2 6mm bolts that came in our hardware bag and attach those to the bottom of the shifter. We're going to put those bolts in the bracket here in that hole and here in that hole. So you're just going to want to push up on the bracket a little bit, and you'll feel everything kind of nicely meet up all flush on the bottom, and you'll know that you are lined up, and you can go ahead and start getting those bolts in there. I got those bolts tightened down all the way into the shifter. Now I'm going to go back up to the top and tighten down the front 2 bolts on the mounting brackets, and then also tighten up the bolt for this OEM cable hanger here. The next step is just to tighten up those bolts like we talked about, the one here on the right and the one over there on the left. And then we're going to hit that 3rd bolt at the very top there, and there is a nut that we placed on the bottom. I just like to use the closed end of a 13mm wrench to stick through right here and hold on to that while I tighten it, and just make sure that the bracket faces the front of the car and keeps that correct orientation that we talked about. And the final thing you want to check for before you tighten this down, you want to have the shifter over kind of to the left on the brackets as much as you can. You can see I just kind of pushed it over there a little bit, so we're going to push it over kind of to the left side, and then we're going to go ahead and tighten those down. Just don't tighten down the 2 in the back quite yet. Okay, I've located my piece of linkage out of the DM-2 kit and the 2 rod ends out of the hardware bag, and now all I'm going to do is take one rod end and thread it in about 6 or 7 threads up into the top, and then I'm going to hand tighten the jam nut onto the linkage, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this one on this end. Just leave them kind of hand tight right now, that way we can adjust this in the proper spot. This area here with this larger bend will be going up to the shifter in the vehicle here, and this end with the smaller bend will be going down to the shift plate on the transmission. So let's go ahead and do that. There is one final thing that we need to remove on the car before we can install that linkage, and it is this cover plate right here that I'm pointing to. It's kind of hard to photograph this, but basically there's 4 bolts. There's one right up there, there's one right down on the bottom of it, then we have one down on the right side of the cover, and then we also have another one that is up on the top. I'm going to point to it with this extension. It's right up there in the top, and you can actually just feel that one up there with your fingers, so you can kind of get a feel for where you need to stick the wrench. But it's going to be a tight fit, getting your wrenches onto the one on the very top, but the other ones are pretty easy to access. So go ahead and pull that off, and then we'll be ready to throw the linkage in there. I just wanted to show you real quick on the test stand. This is that plate that I just removed from the bottom of the car, and I can show you a little bit better where that bolt at the top is. It's pretty hard to reach spot, but you can stick that open wrench in here where I'm kind of sticking my finger, or the closed end of the wrench, and access the bolt head to remove it. And then there is that other one that goes on the bottom down here, and then of course there's the 2 that are pretty easy to get to on the front side. So once you have those out, you can just go ahead and remove that off of the car, and then you're going to want to locate this black spacer that's going to go right onto the shift plate. That black spacer is going to be in your hardware bag, and you're just going to grab it and make sure that the little shaft you're inserting the spacer onto is cleaned of any debris or grease or anything that might be on there, and then you don't want to have any interferences, so that it can slide all the way over on there. And now it's ready for us to install the linkage onto the shift plate. Okay, so I've just placed the DM-2 linkage onto the shift plate. You can see I'm sliding it on there. You're just going to slide the rod end over the shift plate there, and then you're going to grab that little retaining pin that was already on your car, and you're going to stick it back into the same spot, just like that. Pin is back in, and now we're going to kind of check out where our linkage is at. So I can see that it's clearing everything, and it's in a good spot. It's not hitting the drive shaft. It's going up to the shifter. Everything is in the correct spot. So what you can do is you can actually snug up that jam nut onto the piece of linkage. Just make sure that it stays oriented. If it starts to twist left or right or spin around while you're tightening it, it's going to mess the orientation up relative to the piece of linkage, and then it's not going to go back onto the shift plate. So go ahead and tighten that up, and then we're going to go up to the top of the car and see where it's lining up with the DM-2. Now in order to connect this rod end here on the piece of linkage onto the stainless steel component here on the DM-2, we're going to need that 8mm bolt out of our hardware bag. So what we're going to do is we're just going to stick it right through the rod end, ring the shifter up, and then we can just thread that in by hand. So now that it's in there, I can actually shift through the gears. So just third and fourth since the car is in neutral, but you can actually feel it connected straight to that shift plate. And one of the things you're going to want to check for is that the shifter orientation is in the correct spot. So this piece of linkage fits on many different cars, so there's lots of room for adjustability. Now on the 2022, we put it in about 6 or 7 threads, we tightened it down, and it's in a really good spot for us. You can see there's a nice angle there, back towards us in neutral. The shifter's not really far forward or back, it's in the correct spot. So if it wasn't in the correct spot, if it was forward or back too far, then what you could do is you could thread this rod end in a little more, I guess, since ours is out all the way, or you could adjust the rod end on the shift plate, but that's a little bit harder to do. This one's a little bit easier to adjust first if you need to do that. But now that it's on there, we can actually just grab our wrench and tighten it up all the way. And it's really important that all of these connections you're making are pretty snug, because if they come loose, then you're going to feel that in the shifter. But if you tighten everything up properly, that's not going to be an issue. We're going to go back underneath the car and we're going to hook up that OEM cable into the bracket we installed and onto the shifter now. This step's super simple, guys. I'm just going to take a flathead and push this green tab back at the end of that cable. You can see there, I've got the flathead underneath of the green tab. And then I am just going to take the flathead and pull that pink part up, just like that. Now, I can adjust the end of this cable. You can see there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it up into that bracket, and I'm going to pull the end of the cable like that, and I'm going to set it into place. And I'm going to line up this eye on the cable with this pin here on the shifter, so that when it's all hooked up, it smoothly drops over the pin and isn't pulling on the cable like that at all, or pushing on the cable at all. If it's pushing or pulling on the cable, then what's going to happen is it's going to take things out of alignment, and we don't want that. So make sure when it's all mocked up in the right spot, we have that pink part completely depressed, and it's snapped onto the cable now into the correct spot, and then everything's hooked up. So now I'm going to go ahead and do that step. Okay, you can see I've got the shifter installed with the cable now, and I'm going to go ahead and then just push the cable off to show you that it's lined up. You see I've got it tensioned, and I actually oriented this piece of plastic up with the stud here on the DM-2, and I have this side with this divot on the plastic facing towards it. This is really important that you have this oriented correctly over the stud. That way we can insert the retaining pin onto the top. So one side of this plastic piece is completely smooth, and that's the side that you want facing up towards the car. The side with the bulge we want facing down towards the ground, so that we can pull this down all the way. And now that we've got it all hooked up, you're going to locate the hitch pin out of the hardware kit. It looks just like this. And we're going to insert the straight, smooth side here of it through this little dowel pin on the shifter. On the top, there's a little hole going perpendicular to this cable here, and we're just going to insert it through the hole to retain the cable and keep it from ever popping off. We're going to go over how to adjust the shift stops now. So we're going to start with the first and second gear shift stop. And when you get this kit, you're already going to have this 10mm nut holding the shift stop to the bracket. Same with the reverse lockout stop, but that doesn't mean that it's adjusted in the right spot for your car. So you're going to go ahead and get your car into first gear, and what you're going to want to do is adjust the stop over to the shifter so that you still can move the shifter over a little bit. We don't want the shifter to be adjusted against the stop so tight that there's no movement at all in it, which just creates unnecessary tension and everything. So we still want to have a little bit of movement until we engage that stop. And same thing when we get down into second gear, we still want to have a little bit of movement where it can push over and engage that stop and give us that nice firm feel. So once you have that adjusted correctly, it's going to look like this. It's going to have a slight angle on it. That's totally normal. And then you're just going to go ahead and tighten both that 10 and that 13 millimeter down all the way. And then just double check it when you're done. Make sure it didn't move. The last part of setting the shifter up is adjusting the right side stop. It's pre-installed on the bracket, just like the first and second gear stop was. It just has that little 10 millimeter nut holding it down onto the bracket. And then of course we inserted that 8 millimeter with the 13 millimeter hex head over it earlier, and that should still be a little loose. And all you're going to do is put the shifter into fifth gear. You're going to have to find fifth gear. It's pretty easy if you just come from fourth and scoot over to fifth, but make sure it's in fifth. And then you're going to adjust the stop over, and you're going to want a little bit of wiggle room, okay? You don't want it totally tight. You don't want too much wiggle room. You want it just to hit it and firmly stop and then be able to come back into sixth. And same thing, you want to have a little bit of wiggle room, but have that stop making contact there. And then you want to be able to get into reverse, okay? So make sure your fifth and your sixth are working properly and that you can get in reverse. And then once you're at that point, you can tighten that down all the way and you've got it adjusted correctly. And that is really the last step to adjust the shifter. And now we can start putting the car back together. We can go ahead and reinstall our interior trim now. And I just want to make a note on the VB WRXs, there isn't any clearance issues with the shifter, but on some of the older models, this linkage up here and the lever and the bolt all right here do make a little bit of contact with the shifter trim. I've got a piece of trim right here out of a VA that I want to show you. Basically, we'll need to clearance these little tabs down here on the right side, this tab right here, and then there's a little black tab next to it, and you'll have to shave those two tabs down up to this silver piece so that that lever clears underneath of there. So just know that if you're doing this install, or if you're interested in getting one of these shifters and you have an older model WRX, that is something that you may need to do for your vehicle. So again, we have the 22 and that is not an issue with this trim. So we're just going to go ahead and reinstall it. Here's a little shot for you just how firm and short shifting is. It just gives you a way more connected feel into the car. Reverse, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. This thing is just totally killer. Shifter, it doesn't even compare to that giant plastic shifter, even with the upgrades to it. This thing is just totally crazy. So go throw that heat shield back on and then take your car for a test drive. All right, folks, if you have any tech questions or need some further support, the best way to reach us is via email, contact@darkmatterx.com, or you can go on the website, darkmatterx.com, and interact with the chat feature. Those are the two best ways for you to get the support that you might need. And don't forget, we got that giveaway ending May 20th at midnight to win a custom DM-1 V2 or DM-2 shifter. And now that you got the shifter in the car, go drive it, go have some fun, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.